Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Art of Relationship Show. Going to be talking about pleasure avoidant or, pleasure avoidance. And there's been a lot of myths, a lot of stereotypes over the years, and I'm going to throw those at you, plus some tips to help maybe understand it and to help maybe heal it if possible. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be talking about this pleasure or sexual avoidance coming up right after this, so don't go anywhere. Hey everybody, welcome to the Art of Relationship Show. I'm your host, Greg Dudzinski, fully licensed professional counselor, and relationship and sex specialist here in Metro Detroit. I've been doing the Art of Relationship Show for a long time, so make sure you join the comments. Any questions, I'm pointing down below, right? I'm not like just doing this for a reason, right? The reason is, throw out your insights, your comments, your questions down below. I'll do the best I can answer them during the show and everything. And as always, you can check out the show on YouTube and Facebook under LoveGuruGreg. The show recorded episodes are always available. And like this, I am doing it live. I do my shows live, so there's no edits like everybody else does, right? So when they say, I posted a live video, it's edited, it's recorded. It's not live. I'm live. You heard me cough. I trip over my tongue once in a while. So let's get right down to it. About pleasure avoidance are those individuals that, they try to get away from or move away from pleasure or sexual activity. And there's a big myth out there that, the sexual avoidant, or I like to deem it pleasure avoidant as it's been recently called, that they don't want to be touched. They don't like any, sexual satisfaction, anything like that. And they'll do whatever it takes to avoid any type of physical intimacy, okay? And that's why I said, the biggest thing about desire is about pleasure, right? If it's more pleasurable, you're going to desire it more. And this could be, if you look at it in a non-sexual way, you have a lot of fun with your friends. You want to hang out with them more often, that type of thing. You love doing a hobby. You get, desire from it, pleasure from it. You want to do it more, right? So this definitely holds true with sexual intimacy and physical or maybe emotional touch. It doesn't have to be with, physical all the time, but maybe emotional intimacy. You avoid that at all costs. Thus, we deem it, in the field and everything about pleasure avoidant. There's been such a focus on performance, right? About, go through Facebook, right? You look at all the ads that pop up for men, right? Erectile dysfunction, or, for women to be, maybe more lubricated, or women toys to be more, what is it driven towards, right? About pleasure, right? And is it more about, performance, I can't wait to make her come. And I love pleasing ladies. I'm all about that. Self-disclosure, right? But are you more performance-based or are you more pleasure-focused? And this is what we're going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about, those aspects about pleasure resistance and what's going on, right? And a lot of people look at going back to the old school, right? If a woman did not like sex or like to be touched, she was bashed, she was ridiculed, ripped apart, right? About being, she's a prude, she's prudish, right? She's cold, must be like a dead fish, that type of situation, without even looking at what the hell is going on, right? Is that part of lack of knowledge, or let's face it, a lack of maturity, or let's face it, maybe a combination of both? If men got away, they didn't want to be touched, or they weren't into sex that much at all. They must be gay, or there's something wrong with them, right? They're not man enough. They're not masculine enough, right? They must not be a real man. So there's been age-old myths and scenarios out there about bashing people for being, avoidant or not wanting sexual activity, or even being, caressed and touched, or the emotional pleasures of compliments, about affirmations of our love for one another. They'll do anything they can to avoid it. And the big thing is, we look at, and researchers, Esther Perel, Tammy Nelson has done a lot of work in this area that has helped other people in the profession. And, my own maybe 2 cents over the years, looking at what creates avoidance of being touched, or, pleasure, right? And I look at it, and I look at emotional pleasure and physical pleasure. And a lot of people look at, if the emotional pleasure is not there, that person probably don't want to be touched. They don't want the physical pleasure. And what gets in the way of those elements, okay? Like I said, join the chat down below, people. Okay? Throw out your questions, your insights, your comments. I'd love to hear it. So we look at, what is the motivation to, maybe resist pleasure, right? Some people look at it, is it a way to control the relationship? And as I've always said, right, the one in a relationship that has low desire for physical, sexual, emotional intimacy is the one that controls sex or intimacy in a relationship. Let's be real, right? That's just how it is, right? They're the ones that control it in that situation. So when you come into pleasure avoidant, or they're, they want to try to control the relationship so they don't feel vulnerable, they don't feel weak, they don't feel open, they don't feel like they can be controlled in this situation. So they'll do everything they can to avoid, or be open and vulnerable, to avoid any type of pleasure. That's not only receiving, but it's also about giving pleasure, right? If they give pleasure, then that person's going to, of course, want it more, right? Who wouldn't? And then that person that wants it more, are they controlling it? Are they, stepping over the boundaries? And looking at those aspects, right? And a lot of people in these situations, they might be fear of change. They might be, fear of fear of disappointment. So they don't want to even try, because let's face it, it's not going to work. What's the use? That type of scenario. It's almost like a negative connotation, or not negative mindset in that situation. They also might be fear of future-based aspect. Well, if I do this and it doesn't work out, or I do all this and I enjoy this and it's taken away from me, that pleasure aspect. So they get away from that. And another aspect, even about, the motivation behind, or the drive behind being pleasure avoidant, let's face it, I mentioned fear, right? And it could be fear of the past about getting our heart ripped out. I used to love pleasure, love to be touched and all this stuff. And then that person, my ex cheated on me, abused me, those type of situations. And it happens with both men and women. It's not just women in these situations, but there's men that do that as well. I tend to be pleasure avoidant if I'm not feeling emotionally connected with that lady, that person, okay? If I don't feel connected, I don't feel important in the way that works for me, or, what's important to me in a relationship. If I feel like I'm not getting it and that person doesn't care about that, I'm going to shut down. That's who I am. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to become more, if you want to say, pleasure avoidant, because I'm not going to put myself out there. Am I going to be selfish and, I just want sex and I'm not connected to you? Maybe once in a while, but that's not how I'm made, okay? So we look at what fears, or what's going on what the motivation is. There could be past rape. There could be past sexual trauma that's getting in the way, and the motivation about getting through those elements. And like I, mentioned many, many times over the years I've been doing the show and working with, couples and stuff, in my experience, for years working with kids, I don't anymore, but working with severe trauma in kids and teens, about the sexual trauma, sometimes a lot of it's very coercive, right? Manipulative when it comes to kids. If I didn't really love you, I wouldn't do this. I only want to make you feel good, that type of thing. And there's some things, let's face it, that, physically could feel great, but emotionally, mentally, we feel it's wrong. Something's wrong about it. So we have that conflict about, something that feels good. It's wrong, it's dirty, it should never happen. So we conflict that about us having control over it and us being allowed to feel pleasure and not feel guilty. But it's not always on that perpetrator's terms. It's on our terms from now on, about being open. So that's where that motivation comes from, about the drive or the resistance to, resist pleasure or be pleasure avoidant. Is it part of fear of, being controlled, fear of being manipulated, fear of being open and vulnerable? Are those the aspects, or is it, a medical based aspect that, or biology, genetics, that's just not us, right? And there are some people like that. So we need to look at and do a deeper search instead of rip people apart and blame and bash them what's going on. But if that person does not want to learn or grow or teach us, what's going on, what they need from us, so they're no longer pleasure avoidant, then that's going to create the relationship to go down the toilet, right? And that relationship, chances are, it's going to end up in an affair. It's going to end up in, if that doesn't happen, I'm not condoning that, not at all, okay? But typically what I see, one person cheats, that isn't getting their needs met, emotionally, physically, that type of situation, again, doesn't justify it. Or, they're craving what they feel from somebody else, but they really want it from that person, and they love that person. They don't want to end the relationship, but then they do that. Or what's going to happen, the relationship is going to end. The relationship is going to end, either in a breakup or a divorce. And then that pleasure avoidant or pleasure resistant person is going to say, oh, good thing I didn't give myself. Good. Now I know why I didn't open up. Or I, resisted pleasure. I resisted it. I avoided all that. Good thing, because look what happened. When the result is what happened was you being pleasure avoidant or pleasure resistant, okay? And when I say pleasure resistant, that's huge, right? There's a difference aspect about, okay, sex resistant pleasure, because I'm all about sex being pleasurable, right? Why would you want to have sex or be emotionally connected or, physical, holding hands, touch, a caress, being touched, if it wasn't pleasurable? Why would you want that? So we need to get away from that performance-based and look at the aspects of pleasure-based when it comes to sexuality, okay? The more pleasure we seek from it, the more we probably want to be touched, want to be connected with that person that's giving pleasure. But do we want that person to give us pleasure? And are we are we communicating that clearly about what's going on with us if we tend to be pleasure avoidant, okay? Now, we talked about maybe some motivations to be pleasure avoidant. What do we see from people that might be avoiding pleasure, right? That might be distancing themselves from us, right? They show up as, and I mentioned this, maybe cold. They show up as being very distant emotionally from us. They don't want to talk, or they shut down anything to do with sex or emotional intimacy, right? They'll shut down or they'll cause an argument. And this is part of, the energy or the vibe I talk about from people. About what do we see? Man, your vibe is, you're cold, you're mean to me, you're doing everything to avoid it, and me even touching you or giving you a compliment or even a kiss, you always turn away or you go away. Hey, are you mad at me? Oh, no, I'm not. And you're like, what? What's going on? So is it a relationship based? Is it a individual situation that's going on? But we usually see this show up, or I see this show up, when it's about pleasure resistant. There's a lack of motivation, right? There's a lack of motivation to do anything about it, to change, to grow, or my favorite term about, a lack of motivation into trying to resolve it and fix it, and, that type of situation. So then that person, their partner, is going to feel like you don't care to do anything about it, you don't care how you affect me. And let's face it, it shows up that way too, right? So again, I'm all about, hey, I want to know, what am I doing to cause you to be pleasure avoidant with me? What can I do to change and be better and to promote this, right? To make it feel safe for you. I'm all about that. But if that person's doing everything to make the pleasure avoidant individual, feel safe, and they're still not doing it, then that is on them to figure out what they want to do with it, if they want to do anything with it or not. But if they choose not to work on it, and that tells that person it's not important to me, therefore it should not be important to you, right? And how many people have been bashed? Oh, that's all you think about is sex. That's all you want to do is touch me and, touch me. Man, you're always so needy. They start bashing and they start ripping you apart to avoid you touching them, or even bringing up any type of emotional intimacy or physical intimacy. They bash you for feeling the way you feel. So, right, they can continue to avoid those contexts, those environmental situations of being sexual, about being emotionally connected on an emotional level. So you start seeing those situations, and that's when I talk about vibe, the energy from that person, what's going on. They know they're doing it most of the time, right? They know they are doing it. A lot of people talk about, on a subconscious level. No, it might be on a subconscious level, but it's almost becomes a reflex to them, but they realize they're doing it. Because most people, if you bring it up to them, oh no, that don't mean here, let me give you a hug, I love that. But the avoidant individuals, they won't do that. They'll do whatever to bash and blow. Oh, I'm just not in a good mood. They're always having an excuse for being avoidant of any type of pleasure, emotional or physical, when it comes in these situations, okay? Another aspect that you see a lot of people that might be pleasure avoidant or looking at growing or evolving in this area is they're sick a lot, right? They always have illnesses, stomach aches, gastrointestinal aspects. They might have headaches, migraines, body aches, body pains, and there's no medical, scientific, biological, physiological evidence that might support those aspects, right? We talk about psychosomatic aspects in the field. Psychosomatic means, we feel depressed, right? That could be a reason. We're depressed, we're highly anxious, and we all know when we're that way, we don't feel good, right? Our bodies, our neck tenses up right back in here, right? We feel it in our shoulders and our chests if we're highly anxious or panic or we're depressed. We don't feel well, so we can relate. It might not be intentional, like I said, but it's sort of the result of feeling all this aspect, and it comes up, okay? So you look at, again, pleasure avoidant individuals, they'll avoid any touch or any emotion that, reminds the receiver a pleasurable experience, right? They don't want to feel pleasure for one of those reasons, like I mentioned at the beginning, or they don't want the receiver to feel any physical pleasure or anything either, because they're either going to want it more, they're going to feel like they have control over the relationship or situation. And this situation, it's even more difficult when it becomes more intermediate, okay? It's a hit and miss. It's a hot and cold situation. Some people could be hot and cold in 1-2 days, love it, and then the next 2-3 weeks or a month, they're pleasure avoidant again. And then it's almost like you have that hope, right? You know what? Like the commercial, right? Oh, got the dollar, want that dollar, oh, you're so close, right? And you feel like, oh, here we go, we're getting on track, and I love this. And then your legs are kicked out from underneath you, so it becomes intermittent. So sometimes it is intermittent, sometimes it's that way forever, okay? Now we look at, is it situational or is it responsive? Like I said, pleasure avoidant situations, are they because it's that person is feeling degraded, belittled, not loved, not appreciated, by you? Is it situational, or is it a response to the past? Is it a response to maybe having a bad day, that type of situation? But does it turn into a long-term effect? Oh, that's just who I am, and if you don't like it, I hear this from clients. Well, you married me, or you've been with me for this many years. You knew I was not that warm of a person, that I was blunt, that I wasn't that affectionate. And that person, man or woman, they think it's going to change, and then it don't. And then they cheat, or they want a divorce, they want to break up. And then the pleasure avoidant individuals like, why? They're shocked. Oh my God, how could you do this to me? And they play the victim that, oh my God, I've never cheated on you. How could you do this to me? Well, I didn't feel loved by you. You didn't want to touch me. You didn't want to have sex with me, but yet you're blaming me for seeking pleasure. Again, I don't condone it. I don't justify it. I want to be able to go after it and look at what is causing this situation, okay? So again, pleasure avoidant, it can be, symptomatic. It could be a result, like I said, of the relationship status. It could be maybe based on medical conditions, and it also can be based on definitely past trauma or past heartbreak situations that create this. Or, people, I was raised as a child and I saw this go on, and I told myself I would never ever let anyone have this power over me or treat me like this. So they shut down and they don't want to feel pleasure. Therefore, the more pleasure they feel, most people are afraid it can be taken away and it's going to end and be disappointed, right? And a lot of people, the old joke is, right? Why would I want to get married? Because when we get married, the sex is going to end. You're going to treat me poorly. You're going to be mean to me. The affection's going to go away. That's what marriage does. So that's almost that stigma or that myth out there, right? Once you're married, all the sex goes out the window. So why would I want to be married? So it's part of that. They don't want the pleasure to end, to go away, right? Based on situational aspects. And most people in the field will, they might be different, okay? I'm different. I'm one that says, why does it have to change? Why does it have to go away? What causes it to go away? And there's a lot of people that BS in that, well, let's just face it, the bullshit people, to accept that you need to be okay with pleasure avoidant. Oh, that's just what happens. Marriage is this, and you need to accept it and be okay with it. I'm like, no, you don't. I'm giving you permission not to accept it, but to excel at learning and understanding and exploring what's creating, what's going on with that pleasure avoidant individual or situation. What's going on from that aspect? Not only with pleasure avoidant people, when it relates to their partner, that type of situation, a lot of pleasure avoidant individuals, they're going to avoid any type of self-pleasure within themselves, meaning they're not going to masturbate because they might feel like, oh, I might like this and it might get me away. Therefore, I'm going to lose that control or feeling over myself. Or, you know what? Oh, I'm going to lose control, that type of situation. And let's face it, some people out of self-pleasuring might feel dirty, might feel ashamed if they like that, if they enjoy that. No, hell yeah. I'm like, own it, enjoy it, love it. You love self-pleasuring because it can teach you, right, about what you like, what you love, how you want to be touched, and you can teach your partner. It's a win-win situation. But a lot of people don't want to give up that pleasure or for that control, because that person's going to have that control over me. And it's sad. It's a situation. So therefore, they avoid even self-pleasuring themselves for that fear, okay? Now we look at, the situations about what do you do to help work with pleasure avoidance situations. Need to uncover, of course, or try to look at and explore what's causing it. Is it an individual base? Is it past trauma base? Is it a relationship base, or a combination of all those three, okay? Then we look at trying to focus on, is it going to a pleasure focus versus a performance focus? Because a lot of people, let's face it, if we're just looking at performing, do we get pleasure out of that? And I'm not talking some people, performers, right? Get on stage, singers, musicians, actors, actresses, right? They get a thrill out of acting. They love doing it, right? I'm not talking about, that type of focus. I'm talking more that you're more worried about the outcome. Let's face it, orgasm, right? That you're more performance-based on, oh, I stroked you 20 times instead of 10 times before. I lasted this long. Or I made her come 3, 4, 5 times, and I still hear an evidence, and that's great if she wants that, loves that, I'm all, again, but are you more focused on the performance, the outcome, or are you more focused on pleasure? So that's where we shift in looking at helping, going from a more pleasure focus based, woohoo, to from a performance based. Okay. Now we look at, are we shifting from arousal versus desire, right? And see, right? That are you aroused? You have to be aroused first before you desire. No, you don't. You can desire things before you're aroused, right? A lot of people, oh, the guy needs to be, if the guy isn't hard, he doesn't desire you. That's not true. Or she's not wet, or she doesn't desire you. No, she desires you. The guy, whatever, desires his partner, but then the arousal kicks in. What do we do to feed that desire? What do we do to feed and to kick up the arousal, right? Big time, right? Even, and I mentioned this before, we can be aroused. A woman could be wet. A guy could be erect. But that doesn't mean they get pleasure from that sexual experience, right? So there's a big shift on what do we do to kick up, desire and kick up arousal. And what do you do to go from maybe a self aspect to a relationship base? And we know that. I'm all about the Venn diagram, right? About, do we focus on looking at the self, our self-pleasure, and also the pleasure we give? Can we do both? Can we focus on the pleasure we receive and focus on the pleasure that we're giving? Okay, those are two big things. And there's a lot of people out there that they might be people pleasers, right? They're all about, giving pleasure. They have no problem maybe giving pleasure, but their own pleasure, they're going to avoid it because they feel like they're going to be controlled, or they feel selfish if the attention is on them. If all the pleasure, it's all about them being pleasured, they have a hard time and they'll avoid it. No, because they feel maybe guilty. They feel ashamed, or they feel embarrassed because they don't deserve it. You do deserve, everybody deserves pleasure, right? So we have to look at all those aspects and to be able to look at, now, is pleasure avoidant? Is it also based on that, call it, I think Tammy Nelson described it as attraction dysfunction. Now, is it a dysfunction if you're not attracted to that person anymore? Or is it based on, attraction dysfunction based on yourself, right? That you don't find yourself attractive. We age, we get wrinkles. Well, I haven't had hair, God, since I was 19, 20 years old, long time ago. So, we can be attraction deficient, if we will, about ourselves. Is that making us pleasure avoidant? Because we don't want someone to touch our wrinkles, our roll, our whatever, that we become very body centric instead of pleasure centric. And I posted this on Facebook, on my Facebook page under Greg Dudzinski this morning, matter of fact, in looking at, can we be more pleasure focused, more than physical appearance focus, and does that get in the way? Or if we are not attracted to our partner anymore, is it a dysfunction? That's where I have a discrepancy. Is it a dysfunction, or do we look at what is creating it? Is it because our person, we're not attracted to them because they're becoming a mean person, they're becoming an a-hole, they're becoming not attentive to us, they're not being, compassionate, they're not being empathic towards us, they're not caring about us? Or are they attracting because now their hygiene went down the toilet, right? Well, you get me? But their hygiene issues. Is there something else going on? Is it a personality thing, or is it a physical aspect? And there's a lot of people out there that about body positivity, and I'm all about sex positivity and you liking who you are and trying to maintain what we can. But when we start losing attraction, people, most common is the emotional aspects. It's the personality aspects that I run into, where one person is feeling maybe being taken for granted, not being appreciated, right? They're not feeling loved in the way they want to be loved. They're feeling not a priority, or they're not feeling not important to their partner any longer. These are all emotional, mental aspects that creates that attraction. So if you feel that from your partner, yeah, of course you're going to be avoidant from that. Oh, you only want attention. How many people have heard this or been here, right? Oh, you only want to give me attention when you're horny, when you want sex. You only want my body. You don't want me. So we have to look at the dynamics about what is going on, what is creating that pleasure avoidance in that individual, right? Is it an individual thing? Is it a relationship aspect, or is it a combination of both? And trying to look at an underlying issues, what is causing it, and what can we do to resolve it, okay? So, again, my website, theartofrelationships.org. Check it out. Follow me on Instagram, YouTube. Please like and subscribe on Facebook. I'd appreciate it. Be very flattered. Under Love Guru Greg. And the audio version of the show is on every listening platform under the Art of Relationships show. So I appreciate everybody listening, showing up. I appreciate you spending your time and allowing me to come into your lives and hopefully provide some insights and help you to have that relationship you've always craved, not only with your partner or future partner, but also with yourself. Told you, I do it live, no edits. Peace. Bye-bye.